What a wonderful, um, just praise to the fact that just Montessori is this strong. As I listened to these beautiful children and watching them with the violin, I thought only in South Carolina. That can only happen here. We are creating the future of Montessori in America as well as around the world. We know that we have Montessori in so many different parts of the world. I was privileged to go to different parts in order to do accreditation for teacher training programs. This year in my own training program, I have such a diverse group of people that it just makes my heart sing. We have Muslims, we have African American, we have Mexican, we have Puerto Ricans. We have such a wonderful group that I think it just tells us that we are expanding out as Montessorians. And I feel privileged that I've been a part of it for so many years. But I'm coming to you today, and I hope you don't boo me, but I'm coming to you today with some questions. I've been in Montessori long enough to know that we're not perfect, and we are working hard at doing a better job. If not, why are we here? You see, why'd you give up a Saturday? And some of you gave up a Friday as well. But I'm going to ask some questions, and I wish I could tell you I have all the answers, but I don't. But I think we just have to start asking these questions out loud in our schools and in conferences like this so we can grow. One of the questions I wrote down here, should we be more directive? How important are individual or group presentations? What about consistency? Are the movements of the teacher important? Is order important? What about silence? Is walking on the line appropriate? How important is it to observe? Is it important to share what we observe with the rest of the staff? And last but not least, should fantasy play be a part of the Montessori environment? These are only a few. We're going to discuss some of these questions now. I've been asking myself these questions for years because you see, 4 out of every 5 days during the school year, I'm sitting in classrooms observing student teachers. I think it was last year I did 133 visits. Now I hired someone to help me now because it's just, I'm in my 70s and I think, I don't know how much longer I could do this. And it's not the sitting there, that's a joy. It's the getting there and back. It's 2 hours on the road to sit for 2 hours and then 2 hours back. Having questions keeps us alive, and it's significantly more important than having answers. We all want good things for children. That's why we're here. We have given years of our lives, or we just started to make this world a better place for children. And unknowingly, we may be hindering this very work. It's interesting to look at history and see the timeline of what we believed about children. I realized right before this talk that I had to take an hour talk and move it into a half an hour, so I'm not going to go through the whole timeline. But what happens, I found very interesting as I was reading historically, I found out that sometimes what people said in one era, the next era just changed it. Now those are older people. There was a time when whole language was real important. We didn't call it that. And then phonics, and then back to whole language. That's just one example. In one era, we were told not to ever hug or kiss a child. That was John Watson. And then along came Spock, who says we have to hug and touch children. So that's been the history in education. We've got to get it together. But as I read this research, I realized that throughout all these changes, Montessori's ideas and philosophy were at the forefront. They were still right. It's just that we have to believe in them, right? Because people look at us and say, you're doing what? You know, is that a disease? Or is that for very bright children? Or is that for very poor children? People do not understand. But in South Carolina, they must. I mean, I cannot tell you how excited I am about the public schools. Now, there are like 300 or 400, maybe it's not 400 yet, 350 public schools around this nation that have Montessori. And praise God, may it continue. Now we have to get them to be independent, you know, not have to be hindered by no left child left behind. Now, don't get me started on that one. Now, what will be our focus in our third millennium? Have we as child caregivers, moved on with new ideas to the detriment of the child? Or have we not moved at all? A very wise gentleman talked to me last night after my talk, and he said, here's what he hears. Now, he's an outsider looking in to Montessori, and he hears one Montessori teacher saying to another, but that's not Montessori, what you're doing. Do you know, Montessori said, follow the child. We've got to change with the times, good changes. We have to stay true to our roots, and that's what this is all about. Let's create the future of Montessori in such a way that we'll be proud to embrace this work that we're doing for children. I once heard Nancy McCormick Rambush. Years ago, wasn't a Montessorian yet. She was speaking in the next, at a Montessori school near where I was teaching 66 first graders. And I went to her talk, and she said, let's not remain in Montessori's shadow, but let's get up on her shoulders and go forward. That's the whole idea. I'm not saying that change should not occur. I'm saying that in change there's a possibility we'll lose the spirit. That's a loss the movement cannot absorb. Our roots are very rich. If we go back to Dr. Montessori's words, in preparation for this talk, I did just that. I took off my books that were on my shelf for my students, and I started rereading, and I'd get so excited about it. Because here I am, again, these words are saying to me, you're on the right track. And they're words from such a long time ago. In fact, I've decided that I am going to, and I've been already in the process of rereading her books and changing my notes for teaching, as I teach around the country in Montessori teacher training programs. But before I go into the new research, let's revisit our roots. I'm more aware that many of us are losing this spirit. Let's consider the following points. Free choice. Are we slowly taking this away from children? Do we sit back and say, oh, but this 3-year-old is not making wise choices? Did you make wise choices when you were 3 years old? Even teenagers. I mean, I was a teenager, and I made some unwise choices. I went back to my 50th reunion recently, and they reminded me of what I was like. One of the gentlemen said, when you entered the convent, I thought, oh, if she stays, I'll eat my Bible. Are we slowly taking free choice away from children? Please examine yourself in this. Montessori said in The Absorbent Mind, it's clear that the capacity for free choice is a strengthening exercise. She says that in the Secret of Childhood, she said one of the most interesting and unexpected discoveries in our schools was the love and diligence with which children who acted on their own carried out their tasks. A child who is free to act not only seeks to gather sensible impressions from his environment, but he also shows a love for exactitude in the carrying out of his action. His spirit then seems to be suspended. I love the way she wrote. Between existence and self-realization. She says the child is the discoverer. He's a splendid being in search of his own form. Isn't that nice? Are we slowly becoming more directive, or worse, excessively directive? And I mean this in elementary as well as preschool. I was in a toddler room recently, and they were directing these babes. I thought they really don't have the spirit of Dr. Montessori. Now, when I talk to teachers, this is what they tell me. Oh, I have to do this because we have pressure from parents. And I know you have that. I had it too. Administrators, test scores, expectations of future teachers. Do you know that the preschool is worried about what the 6 to 9 teachers need, and the 6 to 9 teachers are worried what the 9 to 12 will need? What about the child? I'm here for the child. There's also these teacher tapes. I teach at our university, and they will say to me, that these 25, 26-year-olds, I call them babes, they will say to me, but sister, I did all right. They have these teacher tapes in their head. And when they put this hat on that says you're a teacher, they go back, not as far as the purple dittos like I did, but, now it's mimeograph, beautiful things, but we were taught with workbooks and we did all right. But see, this is a better way. You work with materials. Then there's the call of the materials. Our materials are so beautiful, you can't wait to get into the decimal system because it's going to be so clear to this child how wonderful 1,000 is. I had a mother who called me once and she said, are you working in the decimal system with Joey? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, he came home and told me he loved me 100. At the car a couple days later, she said, he loves me 1,000. He wasn't quite using it right, but she was listening. She didn't say, where's the paperwork? When is he going to learn to read? When is he going to learn to write his name? She was listening to this child. And then there's pressure from society, the failure of American schools. Schools should be 10 or 15 years ahead of the times, and we're 10 or 15 years behind. That's why I get excited about a school like Brockman, because you're equal with the times. You're moving ahead. Now, maybe people don't know that, those of us who are in Montessori. But Montessori says, wisdom and discipline are waiting to be awakened in the child. The school must give the child's spirit space and opportunity for expansion. She says, this is the starting point of education. Now, presentations. Have we become nonchalant or somewhat too sure of ourselves? I taught school for many, many years. And I'll tell you the truth. Up to the last day that I was a teacher of young children, I practiced my presentations before I gave them. About 5 or 6 years ago, in Knoxville, Tennessee, they asked me to come and work in this private school. I had a whole week of things I was doing. But one of them was they wanted me to, it was Nashville, pardon me, it was Nashville, Tennessee. I'm a geographic dyslexic. They wanted me to go in and teach in a Montessori classroom and let these people from a university sit around and see what we do. Now, the day that I was supposed to do this, the head teacher was sick. I think she was nervous. I really do, because she was there the next day. But they hadn't. But there was such a lot of people who wanted to come. They had me do it for 2 days. But I knew I was going to do some presentations. I practiced them. And they said, you're practicing them? You've done this for so many years? I said, yes, but I've got to practice. Do we practice our presentations? Are we consistent in our layouts? I don't care if you're in junior high or if you're in toddler. Whenever you present something, we read left to right. Our presentation should be left to right, not top to bottom, because we don't read that way. When I went to Korea, I said to the teachers, you should be making your presentations from top to bottom, because that's the way you read. However you read, we have to get that in. And I don't know if that was made clear when we were trained as teachers, and we haven't thought about it. I teach in so many training programs that, teachers sit around and argue. And that's a good thing. We argue about, and when I ran a school, we met once a week. And we would say, well, I think this is the best way of doing this. Well, I think this is. And we talked it out until we knew the best way for the child. We need to give the presentations with care. I see the fruits of how you present when I sit in the classroom. I see little children matching cards, right? And they put a card up, they take another one, they go. And I know someone has presented with that. I was in a Cincinnati school and I watched a little 4-year-old boy bathe a baby. It was a spiritual experience for me. It was so beautiful. He didn't just dump the baby in the water, and because I've seen that. But now I think there were 2 reasons. He must have had a baby at home and watched his mom or dad do this, but the teacher must have given a wonderful presentation. He put the towel on his shoulder and he put the baby up, and I'm thinking, oh, this is so beautiful. The teacher didn't see it. She didn't have to see it. She had done her work when she gave the presentation. I thanked God on my way home that I got to see that because it was just beautiful. Montessori said over and over again, the teacher is within the child. I don't think we understand that. I had an experience this past summer. They asked me to come to Indiana University. I teach philosophy for them, but they wanted me to come 2 weeks later and teach philosophy, Montessori philosophy, to 25 nurses who train nurses from Memorial Hospital. I thought, what can I do for nurses? You know? But they were sure, the leaders were sure, that if they knew the Montessori philosophy, they would be better teaching the nurses. So I went in fear and trembling. I was kind of challenged, and I followed the student far better than I ever have before, because they would talk about PPOs and TCPs, and I had no idea what they were talking about when they talked with each other. And so I had to follow what their needs were. And I left there thinking, I don't know if I helped them. I see, whenever I do work like that, I think it's one more child scholarship. That's where the money goes. I thought, I have one more kid in the school. I don't know if I did much good for them. But about 2 weeks later, I was going down to Fort Wayne, Indiana, to do a workshop, opening school for workshop. And these women heard about it, and 8 of them came. That was my reward right there. I thought they did get it. So Montessori said, follow the child. Please believe that in your soul. We can and must be the agent and the tool the child uses to open her spirit. Have we forgotten the importance of order within the environment? Less is better, ladies and gentlemen. We have many wonderful things, but less is better. I've walked into classrooms that are so crowded, I couldn't focus on anything. Is there order in our presentations? Is our layout clean? And if it's big, get another rug, okay? Within the daily schedule, children need a daily schedule of what's happening when. You can't keep changing it on them. A school I started in the inner city in Orlando, I went back and I could see there was something going on that was wrong, and I asked the teacher, what'd you do differently today? She said, well, you were coming, so we closed off individual snack and we're gonna have group snack. You can't do that to children. If you're gonna have group snack, you have it group snack every day. If you're gonna have individual, you have individual every day. If you want things to go smoothly, when someone comes to observe, do what you do every day. My student teachers will say, well, what do you want me to do today? Should I take group? Should I take lesson? I said, do what you usually do. You know? And then we'll have a wonderful day. So the schedule. Lots of times it's interrupted by music, by art, and those things are good. But if we could, in many of the schools I consult with, I have convinced them that the Spanish teacher or the French teacher should come in the room and do small groups within the room. They just come and sit with their wares, and the kids come and gather. When she's finished, they go off, and some others see that it's empty. It's just a natural. Now, elementary might be a little bit different than that. In disorder, Montessori says in the absorbent mind, the child has an inability to concentrate his attention on real objects. His mind prefers to wander in the realm of fantasy. Order opens the door to progress. Without order, one experiences chaos. Silence. Here's an activity I've seen in a lot of elementary Montessoris. I don't know who started it, but I like it. kids have lunch, and then they go out to play in the playground and run around, and then they come in, and they either take their journal or they take a book, and the teacher takes his or her journal or book, and they all sit somewhere, some under a table, some lying on their stomach on the floor, some sitting at a table. They're all over the place. And it lasts for about a half an hour. That is so beautiful. That's silence, you know? What about silence games? My little kids used to say, can we play a silence game today? They knew that term. And I would say, oh, thank you for reminding me. And we'd play a silence game. I hope they're still being taught in teacher education programs. I think they are. Walking on the line. Now, I know elementary doesn't do walking on the line. But young children, that's such a wonderful gift. Hilda Rothschild, my mentor, who used to sit at the feet of Dr. Montessori years ago, said to me, our lines have become a place to gather the group. And that's true. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I love having the line to gather the group. But is there a little circle inside with a table with things on it that the children can practice walking on the line just for grace? Has the line become for us only a place to gather the group? Next one, observation. Have we forgotten the importance of observation? Montessori created her method by observing. She observed, she saw what was needed, and she moved it in. How can we know what our children need? How can we follow them if we never observe? I teach in Boston every summer, and the director of the program there is doing something new, and I haven't formulated enough in my own mind to do it in my own program. But all of her student teachers are supposed to sit down for 10 minutes a day and observe. I mean, it's mandated. Maybe they have to do that. And we mean active observation, not passive. A lot of us can passively observe, and we're in la-la land. You know, we don't know what's going on. We're just watching. There's active observation. I won't go into that. That's another whole workshop. As a team, do you then observe? Peter looked really tired today. And then somebody might say, oh, his mother mentioned at the car. You know, you have to talk to each other. Montessori believed that teachers, listen carefully, should teach little and observe much. My session Friday, there were teachers who were like this because they didn't get to every child every day. You're not going to. You're not going to get to every child every day. You watch your notes and you say, oh, I haven't gotten to him for 3 days. Next day you have a date with him, you know, you invite him. When you greet them at the door, say, later on, I really want to work with you. Boy, if you said that to me when I was 4 years old or even 8 years old, I'd think, wow, she likes working with me. That's a nice thing. Anne Burke Newbert said in her book, Understanding the Child, observation is vital and essential to the proper implementation of Dr. Montessori's philosophy and method. Observation will enhance our basic understanding of the children and provide us with significant input, feedback, and information necessary for all aspects of our teaching, from the preparation of the classroom to the actual work with children. We were taught in our training courses, we're not supposed to call them training, our education courses, we were taught that observation was the most important role of the teacher, and teachers are not observing. We're so busy teaching. I challenge each of you to ask these questions at staff meetings. Wouldn't that be a great staff meeting? Bring your questions and then discuss them. I bet you'll have questions left over for 3 staff meetings, because we do have them. Now, what about the future we're creating? There's an abundance of research out there for us to study and discern and possibly make changes in our methods. And it's okay to make changes in your method. You can blame me. Research tells us that in the 80s, the debate centered on how soon was too soon for children to be coached in ABC, 1, 2, 3. Now the discussion has become more about nurturing the neurons and less about drilling facts. Researchers are telling us that early social and emotional experiences are the seeds of human behavior. I like that. We need to tune in daily to each child's needs, thus helping them feel safe and loved while encouraging them to explore and experiment. You may have a child who doesn't touch a material for a couple of months, but he's not bothering anyone. He's either absorbing, or he's lazy. Some people call him lazy. Trust him. I have to omit some things here. Sue Bettycamp from NAEYC. That's a good organization to belong to. I've been a member of NAEYC for a long time. She says, children are born hardwired. Experience provides the software. She's using this the talk of today. Education at early elementary and preschool is about listening, guiding, helping individual children make the sense out of the real world. Ladies and gentlemen, the real world is not homogeneous. It is heterogeneous, it's diverse, it's multicultural, multiracial, female and male. We have to remember this. I think I see that more in action here in South Carolina, so far of all the places I go, than any place else. The curriculum is learning to say goodbye to mom, forming relationships with others. Did you ever meet an adult who's socially inept? There is one of my sisters. She must be in her 70s. And she is brilliant. She has 3 doctorates. But she doesn't know what to say to you when she passes you in the hallway. She'll say to me, Anthony, don't you ever wear a dress? Because I wear slacks most of the time. And I know she just doesn't know what to say. And when somebody said to me, she's got all this education, but she doesn't know how to talk. It's such a beautiful thing to see young children coming up and saying, hi, my name is. I saw that when I was on Friday visiting some of the classrooms. With these emotional skills reinforced, says Margot Hammond, reading, writing, physics will come more easily when the child is ready. They will read when they're ready, they'll write when they're ready, and we've got to believe that, even if the parents don't. And even if the government doesn't. Heavy doses of love, attention, and signaling between caregiver and child forge new connections in the brain. We are living in a time when we're told not to touch. Quiet classrooms are expected. Take-home work is the norm. I went to a Montessori school a couple of years ago, and even the 3-year-olds had homework. And when I talked with the teacher, she said, well, that's what the parents want, that's what the school wants. I said, say to the children, guess what your homework is today? Go home and hug your mom. Make your bed in the morning. That's a better homework. These little babies were standing in line. It was a big classroom, and there were 3 teachers, and the 3 teachers had their stations, and these little kids were in line to give in their homework. What's wrong with that? One researcher, his name is Schomburg, he says he still laughs when he recalls his elderly grandmother's reaction to his discovery of a link between touch and growth. She said, you went to Yale to get a PhD and to get an MD, and that's what you learned? To touch a baby is good? I told her, Grandma, sometimes science is slow. Children in our schools are experiencing stress. As a nation, we are paying a terrible price for our inattention to the stresses on children and on their families. Violence among teenagers, suicide, and teen pregnancies are among the obvious signals that our children are growing up with hidden anger and self-destructive impulses. Less obvious is the cost in lost motivation for learning when we fail to inculcate decent self-images in our children. Sometimes our expectations for children as teachers and parents force the child to do developmental tasks they are not ready for. We must allow children to grow at their own pace. Daniel Berrigan says, children are our most endangered species. God, They should be with us and know they're safe, know they're loved, know they're respected, even if they can't put the trinomial cube together. Our future schools and classrooms should be as stress-free as possible. When a child completes an activity, it gives her a secure sense of autonomy and a confidence in her capacity to master her world. This in turn motivates the child to take the next developmental step. And when I speak about stress, I'm not saying your child should never be allowed to struggle, to feel frustrated, because the joy of achievement sometimes only comes after these experiences. I'm saying that when the child is forced to do the work that the teacher wants, she often cannot find the joy and achievement because it is not her work. Why is it that counselors who take their children out of your room can take them, and I went here in this building with the counselor to a playroom, and she says to them, it's safe in here. Here's a sandbox, and she has all of these things, and she said, you can create any world you want. We don't allow children to do that. Do they have to have problems before we allow them? We should allow them that before. Martha McDermott, one of my mentors, once said to me, our classrooms are becoming factories. We just put more and more and more and more stuff in it. We begin to mirror to each child so she knows how to feel about her own work instead of constantly relying on our feedback. We set up successes, not failures. When we begin a new year with everything out on the shelves, there's going to be failures. Or they're going to look at something and say, I can't do that. Or they take it out and start doing it, and someone comes along and says, no, you can't do that. Another way for us to feed this external system is by our positive messages to the child through our touch, through eye contact. You can say to a child with your eyes, I love you. You can say, I respect and love you by the way we touch children. We don't have to be rough. We shouldn't be rough, ever. Our positive statements, you must be proud of yourself. You're the kind of boy who always helps other people. Thank you. Robert Coles, a Harvard child psychiatrist, in his most recent book, The Moral Intelligence of Children, says, children develop who they are by watching our every move and listening to our words. That's how they do it. If they see me being rough with somebody, that becomes okay. And sometimes you want to be rough with somebody. You're going to have those urges because you're human. He says pride, I love this in his book. He says pride is a celebration kids feel as a reward for the job well done, for getting it right. Shame occurs when kids form mental images of a disapproving parent, teacher, or school system. We as teachers can tutor children in positive behaviors. We can set a good example for children, as well as give them language by allowing them to hear our responses to situations. What are our visions for the future of Montessori? Are we willing to look at our roots and our current practices and decide if we need to make some changes? You need to talk to each other. That's why this networking is so important. Because when you network with each other, you hear somebody else's idea. You may reject it quietly, and you may embrace it. Let's talk to others, listen, plan. Because, see, weekends like this are designed to allow you and me to dream and to vision where we are going without losing the foundation of our roots. And I'm going to make it. It's hard to take an hour talk and put it into a half hour. Let me read this. I always loved Charles Osgood. You know, he's a guy who always spoke in rhymes. The other parts of his life I heard later after he died. We won't talk about that. He says, there was a most important job that needed to be done, and no reason not to do it. There was absolutely none. But in vital matters such as this, the thing you have to ask is, who exactly will it be who'll carry out this task? Anybody could have told you that everybody knew that this was something somebody would surely have to do. Nobody was unwilling. Anybody had the ability. but nobody believed that it was his responsibility. It seemed to be a job that anybody could have done if anybody thought he was supposed to be the one. But since everybody recognized that anybody could, everybody took for granted that somebody would. But nobody told anybody that we are aware of that he could be in charge of seeing it was taken care of. And nobody took it on himself to follow through and do what everybody thought that somebody would do. When what everybody needed so did not get done at all, everybody was complaining that somebody dropped the ball. Anybody then could see it was an awful crying shame, and everybody looked around for somebody to blame. Somebody should have done the job, and everybody would have. But in the end, nobody did what anybody could have. You and I are this somebody that must, by our language, by the way we act, by the way we model, stay true to our roots. I made it. 1 inch.